An ancient human looked at a plant and somehow figured out it could change the way they felt. That shouldn't have happened. Experimenting with unfamiliar plants could be dangerous, sometimes deadly. Yet humans didn't just discover cannabis. They kept using it. Thousands of years later, archaeologists studying a cemetery high in the Pamir Mountains found traces of cannabis smoke inside funeral braziers. The people gathered there weren't accidentally breathing it. They were deliberately burning it, which means the discovery had already happened. The knowledge had survived, and the experience was important enough to keep. That leaves us with two questions. How did ancient humans discover cannabis in the first place? And why do they keep using something that could impair awareness, coordination, and judgment in a world where survival mattered? To answer that, we need to go back to a time when cannabis was simply another plant growing in the wild. Long before anyone left evidence of smoking cannabis, humans already knew the plant. The oldest direct evidence of cannabis smoking comes from about 2,500 years ago. But cannabis appears in the archaeological record thousands of years earlier. At Neolithic sites in China, archaeologists found pottery bearing impressions of hemp fibers, dating back thousands of years. People were already using the plant. In 2006, researchers Hongyan Zhang and Ethan Russo analyzed a remarkable discovery from the Yanghai tombs in western China. Buried alongside a man who died around 2,700 years ago was nearly 800 grams of carefully preserved cannabis, not a few scattered seeds. The cannabis had been deliberately collected and preserved. If people were burying large quantities of cannabis 2,700 years ago, how long had they already known the plant? People don't preserve that much of a plant they barely know. And the Yanghai tombs are still centuries younger than the earliest evidence of humans using hemp. By the time cannabis appears in ritual smoke, people had already been living with the plant for a very long time. The question is no longer, how did humans find cannabis? They had already discovered the plant. So what made them start using it in a completely different way? The answer may have been hiding in a cemetery. In 2019, a team led by Meng Ren analyzed residue from wooden braziers found at Jirzhenkal Cemetery in the Pamir Mountains. The cemetery is about 2,500 years old. Braziers contained burned stones. The residue contained cannabis. Not cannabis that had been stored. Cannabis that had been burned. The discovery was published in Science Advances. A cemetery, not a house. Not a workshop. Not farmland. A cemetery. People were using cannabis during funeral rituals. By then, cannabis was already familiar. Humans had been using hemp for thousands of years. The Yanghai tombs already showed people preserving large quantities of the plant. Yet the earliest direct evidence of smoking appears here, beside the dead. Imagine looking at the archaeological record without knowing anything about cannabis. You would see a useful plant, then a plant buried in a tomb, then a plant burned during funerals. Something changed. The question is what? And cannabis may not be the only place we find that pattern. Because cannabis isn't the only substance humans treated this way. If cannabis only appeared in one place, we could probably dismiss it as a local tradition. But archaeologists and anthropologists keep running into similar discoveries. In parts of North America, some indigenous groups used peyote, a small cactus known for its hallucinogenic effects. In the Amazon, people brewed ayahuasca from jungle plants to produce powerful visions. And around 9,000 years ago, people living at Jiahu in China were already making fermented alcohol. These societies were separated by enormous distances. The people making alcohol at Jiahu weren't exchanging ideas with communities in the Amazon. Yet they all discovered different ways of altering ordinary experience. That changes the investigation completely. This is no longer just the story of cannabis. It's the story of humans. Across continents, across thousands of years, people kept discovering substances that altered ordinary experience. And they kept returning to them. For most of human history, survival depended on staying alert. You needed to notice predators, remember where food could be found, avoid injuries, make good decisions. The cost of a mistake could be severe. So why would humans repeatedly make room for experiences that altered perception, judgment, or awareness? Not once, not by accident, but across generations. Some researchers think the first question has a surprisingly simple answer: curiosity. Someone noticed a familiar plant. Someone wondered what would happen. Someone tried it. Curiosity can explain the discovery. It doesn't explain why the knowledge survived. That question has occupied anthropologists for decades. One of them was Michael Winkelmann. Rather than excavating ancient sites, he compared hundreds of shamanic traditions from societies around the world. The same pattern kept appearing. Altered states were woven into healing rituals, religious ceremonies, major community events. These weren't isolated experiments. They had become traditions. Another anthropologist, Victor Turner, approached the question from a different direction. He studied rituals themselves. He found that many created unusually strong feelings of unity among the people taking part. If shared experiences like these strengthened communities, that could help explain why they continued long after the people who first discovered them were gone. There isn't a single explanation that fits every culture. But curiosity may explain why someone first tried using a plant they already knew in a completely different way. It doesn't explain why the practice survived for thousands of years. Anthropologists still debate that question. Across cultures separated by thousands of miles, the same pattern kept appearing. Perhaps survival was never the whole story. We'll probably never know who first discovered cannabis. That person's name disappeared thousands of years ago. The discovery didn't. Somewhere between that first experiment and the first ritual, the experience became knowledge. The knowledge became tradition, and the tradition outlived the discoverer. Maybe curiosity explains how cannabis was first discovered. But curiosity alone doesn't explain why generation after generation chose to keep that knowledge alive. Perhaps that's the real story archaeology reveals, not the story of one remarkable discovery. The story of a tradition that survived long after its discoverer was forgotten.